Hello. Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
So, welcome everyone to our usual Wednesday webinar with Hire. I'm very excited to be here. I feel like I'm so used to being here on a Wednesday now. It's great. It lets me know what I'm doing with my Wednesdays. Um, So before we kick off, it's always lovely to know where people are joining from in the world. We always have such an international audience, so pop us a little comment, let us know where you are. Me and Ruth are in very different locations. I'm in London. Ruth, where are you today?
I am just outside Atlanta in Georgia in the US of A.
Amazing. UK and US going on today. But yeah, let us know where you're joining from. I guess for anyone who might be new, if this is maybe your first time joining us on a webinar or you've not heard of Hire before, I'll do a little bit of an intro just to bring you up to speed. So my name is Kelly McGrath Smith and I'm the community director here at Hire. And I guess to explain the magic of Hire for anyone who doesn't know, we are a free to join global community of internal TA and HR folk. So we've got over 10,000 members at the moment. It's absolutely amazing and growing. And in essence, we almost like to look of ourselves as like the hive mind of global TA. So really on a mission to help level up the industry, to support people in the industry. And part of that is also bringing you these lovely weekly webinars. And if you are not already a member of Hire and you'd like to join, I've just popped the little link below. So such great tech here. So you can head to hirehq.com to sign up. We've got lots of different like interest group channels within Hire as well. So discussing things like sourcing, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It's also a really great place if you're a standalone person in a HR or TA role. You can immediately have peers that you can bounce ideas off and almost sense check some things as well. So do pop over and join us if you're not already a member. Another thing is throughout this webinar, feel free to drop us a comment. We'll also do a little bit of a Q&A at the end, but don't feel shy if you have any questions as we go, any thoughts. It's always great to have these sessions as interactive as possible as well. We will also have this on replay. So if you ever did want to go back and revisit it or share it with anyone, you can absolutely do that as well. But I guess this brings me nicely to the point of introducing Ruth, because it's just been a lot of me talking and I am the least interesting person in this duo. So
No.
Ruth, tell us about you. Tell us who you are.
Well, hello everybody. It's lovely to sort of almost see you on this one-way track. But I am a former CPO, although sometimes still advising as CPO, Chief People Officer, that is, by the way, not product, and executive coach who honestly these days spends most of my time helping women in HR claim the career they really want without imposter syndrome. And having worked as a leader within organizations like Shazam, like Onfido, and like BP Launchpad, I really know what it means to have to navigate your way as a woman in the workplace for sure. But I also really enjoy getting involved in advising and supporting other businesses as they grow too.
That's amazing. And I think those are such amazing companies to have on I was going to say on your repertoire as well. I think they're very well-known companies globally. And I guess, we will kind of discuss today, I think we've got a plethora of subjects to kind of look at, but I guess where this kind of topic came from is obviously, Ruth, you started out more in the TA field and then actually had that pivot into HR. And I think this is definitely something within the community that a lot of people have been, talking about. I think certainly with the way the market has been in it feels like a long time, but certainly the last year, we've still seen more HR roles advertised, but less TA
Mm-hmm.
roles. I think a lot of people are thinking, look, how can I upskill myself a little bit in HR? Or
Right.
do I move to HR? Do I make the pivot? And I think when you and I were discussing this as well, one of the things that we were saying about covering is actually helping people understand if that is actually the right move for them, because sometimes we don't know. It can seem like this kind of title up in the distance, but what might be really lovely for people is, I guess, to maybe hear from you in terms of your move and kind of how that journey came from being in a TA role and actually moving over to the HR and people space.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I dive into that, I just want to be very clear. Yes, I am now founder of Bloom, which, yes, is specifically focused on working with and supporting women to get what they want out of their careers and step into leadership spaces. But absolutely everything we cover today is relevant for everyone. And I want to see everyone win, right? I'm equal opportunities winning. So, please know that whoever you are welcome here, and I will absolutely give you some stuff that's useful, I hope.
Yes.
But to come to your question there, Kelly, yeah, okay. So maybe I should just start with a little bit about what my background actually is. Because I was actually in recruitment agency for 13 years, which is quite a long time, because a lot of people, particularly the ones that go in-house, end up going a bit sooner over, right? But in my case, I was definitely it was 13 years in the trenches. So if you're a recruiter in an agency, high five, I'm with you. Now, for years, though, I felt funny about my career because, I'm talking about, I got into recruitment in the year 2000, and it was a very unfashionable place to be. Like these days, people actually finally are starting to recognize and value talent and really see it as a sort of strategic advantage in a way that in my day, that wasn't the case, right? So I really, really struggled with my own self-esteem, and then reputationally being a recruiter was actually quite tough, right? Because it just, the world didn't really receive you that well as a recruitment consultant, right? But so I did that for a number of years, and then I kind of went through this sort of big life change, big, huge, got divorced, left the ex-husband, started my life over again, essentially, and started to ask myself, what do I really want? And I didn't honestly know. I didn't have a clue. But I decided at that point to commit to recruitment. And the moment I said, I'm committing to recruitment, then a fairy godfather appeared and brought Shazam to me and said, hey, do you want to be a contract recruiter at Shazam? And I went, okay, yeah. And I honestly think it's because I energetically committed to something that the universe went, okay, here's something then, Penfold, I'm going to give you something here, right? And it was only when I got to Shazam that I realized the magic of the experience that I'd already gained, because all those years in agency were exactly what made me successful at Shazam, because I was versatile and adaptable, and I had a high degree of resilience. And my whole mindset and way of being was the very definition of startup. So I started on a contract recruitment role, and within 6 weeks, the fairy godfather that brought me in, Ryan Broad, left, and I put my hand up for his job, and I said, you know what, I can do that. And my boss at the time went, yeah, sure, all right. Of course you can, and kept looking for my replacement. But within a few weeks, she was like, you know what, actually, I'm going to offer you that job. And so that was the job that I then did for almost 5 years, where I worked with the wonderful Chris Abbas of higher fame, obviously. And so, yeah, it was a really, really great experience. But I did, having gone there and been there for 5 years, what you find is once you're at a sort of name that people recognize, everyone wants you to come in and do exactly the same job that you've done there somewhere else. And I was absolutely determined not to go and do the exact same job somewhere else. And so I turned down lots of people coming my way because I was Ruth at Shazam for a while. But whilst I was there, really, that's where I started to step into my authenticity and understand myself a little bit better. And I'll pause there, Kelly, in case there's anything you want to chime in with. Otherwise, I'll dive into a little bit of how I did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I think one of the things I think that you said at the start, which I think is really important to emphasize, is that people working agency side or anyone with a career that start agency side, that really does set you up for success. I think there is definitely that view, and I was in the same boat as you, where when I was working agency side, sometimes I got comments when I would say what my job is, and you'd be like, oh, it's a really good job, I really like what I'm doing. And actually, so many transferable skills. And I think, like you said, when you then go to your in-house role, you're just building on that. And
Yeah,
it's
big
just a
time.
stepping stone. One thing that I just was really curious about, so when your boss, so when Ryan left, at that point, had you been thinking about a move to HR, or did it seem just quite like, oh, this has just kind of happened?
Oh, no. So that was just me heading up talent acquisition, which I did for
Mm,
5 years, right? So no, at that point, I wasn't actually not true. When I was younger, I thought maybe I want to be an HR person when I was in
mm,
recruitment. So I did kind of, and I bet many of you this will resonate. HR kind of felt like this holy grail a little bit, to
mm,
Kelly's point at the beginning, where you're like, ooh, ooh. But what by taking that role as director of talent acquisition,
mm,
I was also able to, I would say, noodle in lots of different areas of the business. So, like over the years, I got heavily involved in leadership development, management development, our internal comms, our employee experience, because as many of you will probably find, if you're in in-house roles, you kind of bring people in and then you're like, okay, now what happens next? And how do I help these people be successful? And I became very
mm,
motivated to help humans become successful, because at the same time in my own life, I was rebuilding myself from the inside out and
yeah.
learning how to set up my world in a way where I really thrived and I felt successful in it.
And I think that's also a good point in terms of actually, you know, a lot of, especially if you're like director of TA level, manager senior level in TA, you'd be surprised the amount of your role that is, straddling HR and people, depending on where you work, without actually you maybe knowing it as well. So were you 5 years then heading up at
Yeah.
Shazam? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Until we sold to Apple. And during
Mm,
that time, and some of the stuff I think that you might be excited or to try, if this is something you haven't actually considered, is, what I would say is I didn't understand the value of values for a really long time.
mm,
And I kind of had some awareness of my intuition. I honored it by deciding to leave the ex husband and start my life over,
mm,
right? But I didn't know who I was at that point, honestly. And I was 30 by then, right? I didn't
mm,
know who I was. And I kind of disregarded my intuition and marginalized it to fit in. So if my nervous system was freaking out about something, a person,
mm,
a situation, whatever, I just kind of overrode it, right? I wasn't really aware of the signs that my body was giving me. But I learned the power of values at Shazam when I took the business on a journey
mm,
to get their own values, which is something maybe a few of you have done in your jobs, right? And as I was creating these values for the business and I was understanding how values works, and that, like, values, for anybody that doesn't know, it's more than just having some list of things on the wall, right? It's who are we at our best and who do we want to be? But that's something that we then use not just to attract new people in, but it should be used to inform how we live, how we breathe, how we make decisions, how we come together as a leadership team, how we operate, right? And
mm,
I was kind of realizing that values was so much more than just something to stick on a careers page. And I was like, wow, maybe I could use these in my own life. And honestly, I then did this basic exercise online, very basic, and I figured out what I thought my values were. And the
mm,
first place I tried to apply them was in dating, because I was like, you know what? If these are what my values are, then maybe I should be looking for people who share my values, right?
mm,
But what I realized very quickly is it wasn't about, do they have the same values as me? It was, do I get to live my values around them? And the same is true in the workplace. So the question you want to be asking yourself is not, does the company have exactly the same values as me? Because they're not gonna, right? The company is made up of multiple people and you're just one human. But the question you want to be asking yourself is, do I get to live my values in this environment, or do I feel like I'm leaving myself behind? And
Mhm.
Kelly, now's probably a good time, because if anyone wants to figure out what your values are, I actually have a really simple exercise that
Yes.
you can do. So you can, hopefully the QR code will work, but if not, I do have a link that I can share. This will be that moment where you're like, it doesn't work, and I'm like, no, but we've got the link that we can share afterwards if you need it. But I'll just sort of leave
It
that up
works.
there for a sec.
It
Um,
works. It works.
okay, good. Because I do want to share what I've done. What I suggest if you do with your values is, don't just create a word of the thing you think it is. Turn them. You know how like companies have like little phrases and then little descriptors that tell you what that means. Like, have fun with it. Bring them to life. So one of mine is dance like nobody's watching, and that's all about unleashing
Mhm.
creativity. One of them is love wins, and that is all about culting community, oneness, connection with other people. Living courageously is another one, which I think does what it says on the tin, but trying to be bold and courageous and be our most authentic self. And then taking ownership, because you are responsible for your own life. And it's up to you to create the right experience that you want in it. So that, like, get creative with it is all I'll say.
I love
Right,
that.
I'll pause there, Kelly, before I keep diving into other rabbit holes, in case there's anything
Oh,
you want to add.
I love a rabbit hole. I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and apologies if I'm cutting ahead, but I'm really
No.
curious around, I guess from your time at Shazam, you obviously kind of worked up the ranks, and then there came that point where actually you did move into a HR role. How did your values kind of show up during that transition, and did they take, I guess, a leading role in you actually making that pivot?
Yeah. So what I would say is, I didn't actually get to make the pivot at Shazam. I just took on
Mhm.
more responsibility. My title didn't change. I just
Mhm.
meddled, which I highly recommend if you're someone that is in-house and wants to get a bit more HR experience. But I did get very clear that I knew that I wanted different next, right?
Mhm.
So when people were approaching me for roles, I built my network all the time, because, side note, one of the wonderful things about being a recruiter is you are a networker by design. And I honestly, now that I work with people who aren't always from a recruitment background, often they are, but when they're not, they're like, networking, reaching out to people. So you have this
Mhm.
amazing skill that is so valuable, and you have to realize how amazing it is. But because I was like Little Miss Networker, like times 100, I was always building my network and connecting with different people. And even when I got approached for a role, I made friends with the people that were approaching me, right? So my actual opportunity for my pivot came because I was approached to come in and do, again, a contract role. So it was a risk, but they tried to headhunt me for a role in talent, which I wasn't interested in. And it was about a year later, they were like, actually, now we need someone to come in and step and cover for our VP people. Will you be that person? We still think you're awesome. And I was like, yep, I am in.
Wow, I love that. It's also that thing around timing as well, right? It's like, you could have gone for the directive TA role, which was, kind of within the remit that you had been doing, but actually by understanding that actually that wasn't what you wanted, waiting, you ended up in this role that you highly desired. Um, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the reality of actually making that change.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is, I would love to tell you that I already had all the confidence in the world at that point, but I definitely approached that role in a very typically female way, feminine energied person way, which is, I'm not good enough. Um, I've got imposter syndrome. Yes, I believe somewhere deep in me that I can do it, but I'm going to go and like do my CIPD whilst I'm doing it. But as soon as I got there and I was actually sitting at that leadership table, it's like this sort of veil dropped and everything sort of clicked. And I went, oh, okay. So they're just like me. Oh, okay, cool. Great. And suddenly I was able to really claim that role much more fully. And it didn't take me long to get there, but I definitely did enter into that role with a bit of imposter syndrome going on, right? Happily though, because I'd been learning how to really step into and honor my authenticity in my Shazam years, it wasn't very hard for me to bring that into that environment quite quickly. And I know authenticity is a bit of a buzzword for people at the moment. And the truth is about authenticity is that it is almost impossible to achieve for a lot of us who feel like we are in survival mode more often than not in the workplace. So when I was in these leadership roles, at first I did struggle to find my voice. And so that's kind of where a lot of bloom came from, is that I don't want other people to have to go, like, I've already hacked it, so let me help you hack it. Because there are a couple of things I read recently, Kelly, which really stuck with me. I think the woman's name is Bronnie Ware, and she was talking about the things that people regret when they're dying. And two of them are, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not what others expected of me. And I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. And so, like, literally, these are things that people regret when they are dying. Authenticity is one of our greatest regrets. So you definitely want to be learning to find your way back to you as quickly as you can.
And with that, I mean, maybe you can share how we can start to tap into that from that perspective of maybe there's someone tuned in and they're thinking, gosh, I don't really know who I am, or maybe they've been on a bit of a treadmill with work and they're like, do I want to move to HR? Do I want to explore this? Like, where could those people start?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely can reflect on where so I would start with a reflection. We do have a whole assessment in it in Bloom, but where do I get stuck at work? Where do I feel less authentic? And look if there's a bit of a theme or a thread. I learned that there were some human characters that kept repeating themselves in different humans for me. And some of those were the people that I felt most uncomfortable with. So I had to learn how to become more comfortable with them by frankly leaning into discomfort and having uncomfortable conversations where, I kind of worked on the relationship and had kind of relationship reset conversations and things like that. But also once you're seeing where you get stuck, what do you need to do before those meetings, right? Are there any rituals, right? Do you need to listen to like your favorite songs so that you arrive in that meeting like, what do you need to do? What do you need to do to give yourself the best shot? Do you need to meditate before you meet someone that you find a little bit difficult to be around? Do you just need to acknowledge to that person, I find you a little bit difficult to be around? That's what I now do, right? Can you feel it too? How can we work together better? And another simple reflection is that you can do in your working day is like, what gives me energy and what takes my energy away, right? Because the biggest thing of all about figuring out who you are and what you want is to figure out as quickly as you can, what is my zone of genius and can I operate in it? Because I'll be honest with you, whilst, don't get me wrong, like the chief people officer role it's great and it helped me grow hugely, and I still dip into and do that role to a degree today. Not all of that role is operating in my zone of genius, right? The work I do today to support businesses to grow from the outside and to work with humans, whether in groups or otherwise, to learn how to lead better and to get closer to who they really are, that for me, I'm operating in my zone of genius and I can feel the difference. So start to become aware of what gives you energy and what takes your energy. And you can't always not, like in the chief people role, there were things that gave me loads of energy. I couldn't necessarily not do the things that took my energy away. I had to learn how to do them, right? You can't run away from it, but being aware of it helps you to do more things that are in your zone of genius, which, guess what, builds confidence, builds self-belief, helps you realize how truly excellent you really are, and really, really start to bring that into the organizations that you are in.
And that kind of brings us nicely to one of the points that we were talking about. And I think you probably mentioned maybe last week when we had our call around everything starts with how we see ourselves. And I feel like that really resonated when you're looking at, you know, how you show up in work and how you portray yourself in terms of what that move is. And like we had said earlier, if a move or a pivot to HR is the right thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that getting close to who you really are will help you figure that out. And that may or may not be HR, right? You may, like, actually, as soon as I stepped away from recruitment and I look back at it, there was so much of recruitment that I missed. Like all the branding and the marketing and the getting to speak to lots of different people and get them excited about something. And actually, my relationships that I built during my recruitment years still serve me today. I still have, literally this week, spoke to somebody who in the last week who I interviewed for a role, and she was like, I've never forgotten you. If I joined that company, it would have been for you. Yet our conversation, I've never forgotten it. It changed this, right? So like, you have an impact on people's lives in your role right now. So, do think carefully about what you want next. But I wonder if it might be useful for people if we do a little bit of a, I guess, almost like a micro brainstorm, a micro reflection together about how satisfied you are across different areas. There are 5 P's of career freedom that I like to talk about. The first being pay. Now, recruiters, we're quite good at talking about pay and getting paid because we kind of grown up that way. But for anybody that maybe isn't, we often say pay doesn't matter. I just want to create an impact or whatever. But pay does matter. Pay impacts your life, right, in some way. And HR is often the lowest paid member of a leadership team. So what's up with that, right? And perhaps that's something that needs to change. The next one is promotion. So you might be getting ready for leadership. You might already be at the top table. And maybe the title that you've got isn't really the one that you want. So are you satisfied with that? Are you satisfied with where that is? Progression. Are you in a season where you want to dedicate more time to growth? Do you want to study something? Are you growing in the way that you want to be? Are there courses and things like that you want to be exploring? Now, the other P is peace. Because sometimes we're in a season of our life where actually the thing that we want the most and need the most is actually peace. Do you need to work less hours? Do you need to learn how to leave work at work? Is that where you're at? And then the last one is the pivot. Do you have a sense that you're looking for a more radical shift in your career? Maybe you're looking at others and you're feeling a sense of maybe jealousy about what they're doing right now. And let me just reframe what jealousy actually is. It's self-fury, right? You're mad with yourself because you're not doing the thing that you probably truly want to do. So jealousy is not a bad thing. But when you feel jealous, go, what's behind that, right? So now we can do this a few ways. Either if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, you can draw a circle and split it into 5 sections, or you can just give it like out of 100, how satisfied am I in this area? So those 5 areas were pay, promotion, progression, peace, and pivot. Like, is it a pivot, right? And then I want you to maybe you're just drawing out a circle, splitting it into 5, and then shading it in up into like a little slice of cheese, right? And see whether you can now just sort of shade in. So pay, promotion, progression, peace, or pivot. How satisfied are you across those different areas? If I can find a blank sheet of paper in my pad, I'll draw mine and do it too, just for funsies. So
I love this. I've also popped the 5 Ps in the chat there for anyone, so that you don't have to.
First of all, my 5 Ps are a bit wonky. But if I've got pay, promotion, progression, peace, or pivot, great. And you've just put in the chat, thank you, dear. And then you can shade in, how satisfied am I? How peaceful am I right now? Right? And maybe this is something that you want to do later, right? But maybe you already know. Maybe you already go. Maybe you're already sitting there going, it's pay. It's progression. It's peace. The pivot, I want a change. Side note, if you want a change, great book, Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. It's a workbook. Get the physical copy. It's amazing. It helps you beta test different career scenarios. I literally love it. And in fact, even if you're not thinking about the pivot, it's worth reflecting on this stuff. So there is an amazing workbook that you can work your way through. Now, I want you to look at the one that feels the lowest. So feels the most empty, right? Like, how full am I? So if I know that I hardly have any peace and my little squiggly piece of cheese is tiny for peace, then I want you to just take a breath and just sit with that for a moment. Now, what I want to do with everybody right now is, you can decide how you want to do this. You can close your eyes if you want to, or you can just keep with your sort of brainstorm on your piece of paper. I don't mind. But before we do it, what I'm going to ask you to do is blurt out your crazy idea for your career. Just like any old, like whatever crazy thing comes in your brain, I want you to say it. I want you to think it, whatever it is. I'll give you an example. My husband is an event MC. And maybe 15 years ago, he asked himself the question, what he really wanted. And what he came up with, he just let his brain do this, right? This little wild thing, right? And his brain went, MC Hammer meets Tony Robbins. And at the time, he was like, what kind of craziness is that? What does that even mean? Until maybe 5-6 years later, he'd become an event MC, sharing the stage with Tony Robbins, funnily enough, but sharing inspiration, dancing like MC Hammer sometimes. So literally nothing is off the table. No one can see it. So wild ambition, my friends, like, take a deep breath with me. I'm going to close my eyes so you don't feel weird. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Let's take another one for good measure. All the way in and all the way out. And now, wild idea. Okay. I don't want to give you longer because it has to be like a crazy, like MC Hammer meets Tony Robbins thing. And I want you to hold that thought, because you can ask any questions that you want about how between Kelly and I, how we think you might get there at the end. So nothing is off the table. All right, I'll pause there because obviously that was a little bit out there.
I love that. And also, I think it's worth noting that we actually met in yoga training. So me and Ruth, big fans of the breathing.
We are. And actually, that is our origin story, Kelly and I. We actually were on an advanced yoga teacher training together, weren't we, dear?
Yes. And you know what was quite nice about that? Sometimes when you do yoga teacher training, you forget, no one asks you what your job is. So actually you meet, and it doesn't matter what you do for work, you're just kind of a person, you know. And I think those kind of breathing exercises are really, really powerful. And I think, you know, similar to what you were saying from your husband's perspective, you're just tapping into a part of your brain that maybe you've been shutting down a little bit and you haven't been quite, you know, understanding like who you are from like an authentic perspective. And yes, ideas can be wild, they can be varied. I mean, my brain always goes to something to do with cats, and I'm just like, I'm wearing a cat shirt, and I mean, it's just my whole life is cats.
That's it. Like, it's all to play for. This is like this. And here's the thing, people who I coach and work with are like, I don't really know what I want. I'm going to call BS, because we all know what we really want. We all know deep down, you know what you want. You're just not listening to it. And that's okay, because no shade. I've spent my whole life not listening to it. I'm only just listening to it at the grand old age of 43. So, like, no shade for not listening to it. But there was something that told me, you want to do yoga. Oh, do you want to do a coaching course? Yeah. When I did my coaching qualification, I didn't plan on being a coach. I told myself I just wanted to be a better leader. That was why I did it, because that was what my brain could cope with, because change is scary. So the brain does all this hocus pocus to give us excuses and reasons to not do something, to stay small, to not lean into this intuition that's guiding us. And I also, what I love about recruitment is it's full of the maverick thinkers and the rebels and the people that didn't quite fit in. So I can almost guarantee that any of you that are watching this, you have that intuition inside you. You have something that's a bit countercultural, a bit different. You kind of have that feeling maybe already. So you already know deep down where you want to go. Most likely your job now is to help you get access to what you already know.
And do you think, like, with those sort of exercises, so, you know, we'll say you come up with something, I don't know, we'll say, I'm going to use my example of it's like cats and something. Can we also kind of shape that into the career that we're in? We'll say TA or HR. So it's like, sometimes there's a fear that, you know, you have to quit your job and, you know, go and live on a retreat looking after cats. I really am making myself out to be a crazy cat lady, and I'm fine with that. But you know, it might be that, yes, like that's fine. It might be that, you know, it's working in recruitment for an animal charity. You know, it's, I guess there's different ways that we can tap into our intuition to be like, well, what does that mean? Is it something that is charitable, or, you know, is it a bit of a side hustle as well? Because I do think we've kind of grown up in this culture where it feels like you have to do the same job 5 days a week. And actually, Ruth, you're a great example of someone who, you've been a CPO, you've been a yoga teacher, a coach, and actually you don't have to fit this mold of you just do 5 days a week.
No, exactly right. Exactly right. And it is so important that you realize that, yes, your intuition knows what you want to be doing and probably knows what your zone of genius is. I'll put my pad down now. Knows what your zone of genius is, but it doesn't know how that's going to manifest. It's got no idea, right? Like, it doesn't know. So as a child, I wanted to be a TV presenter, right? And this was, by the way, pre anybody really wanting to do that. We barely had TVs in those days. We're talking about the 80s here, everyone. You know, but I was like, yeah, I want to do this stuff. And I only then it was through my career in people that I managed to start getting on stages, and that through my evolutionary journey that I created a podcast. It was through that. So it hasn't arrived in the way that my little intuition as a child was telling me, but it has. I still get the same feeling, and I'm still getting the same, you know, self-honoring by doing those things. So, you know, I absolutely was able to, even when I was in those roles, I had my side hustles. When I was at Shazam, I was learning to teach yoga and teaching yoga, and you know, then I carried on with that, and then I started advising other businesses. I launched my podcast, and that was really interesting, and it fed a different part of me. So yeah, I mean, we need to stop looking at the day job as the thing that's going to serve everything that we ever want. But equally, there's nothing wrong with having the day job either, and letting it feed your soul and really kind of help you step into that bigger, bolder, braver version of you that you know is in there.
And I guess that kind of ties into what you were saying earlier, and that kind of, as recruiters, we're networkers, right? And we, by our definition, that's kind of how we started. And one of the things kind of on that thread that you and I spoke around was kind of that team that you build around you. And I think you used the term like your own executive team. So maybe you can tell
Executive
us a little bit
Yeah.
more about how we can do that and what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I'm all about an executive team. So I encourage every human to build your personal executive team or C-suite around you. Now, you can have it be as big as you want. You don't have to formally invite people in. I have probably about 15 people in my executive team and they don't know they're in it. But there are three kinds of people that you need: the champion, the challenger, and the cheerleader. So the cheerleader is literally your hype person. So, when you have the crazy idea and you've got that friend that's like, you do it. Yeah, you can do anything. We all need that person because they help us to dream bigger and think bigger than we are today, right? And then you need the champion, the person that's going to talk about you in rooms that you're not in. Maybe they're a bit further ahead in the thing that you're doing, but you need that person who is going to help you create opportunity for yourself, right? The challenger is also really important though, because if you are a people person and a talky person, we're very good at believing our own hype, and you need somebody who can call BS, right? You need somebody that will go, is that really true? Or are you just saying that it is? Right? And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we need that person. I definitely need that person who can actually call that stuff out. So if you want to figure out who yours are, do a little brainstorm, right? Challenger, champion, cheerleader. Do a little brainstorm. Who do I know in each one? And then just become a bit more intentional about reaching out to and connecting with those people, because that will really serve you in the sense of building up yourself. And another big part of building up yourself is building your belief in yourself, right? And that's where the cheerleader is really important. But I've got another tool that you may want to pick up for that particularly, which is to start your case file of excellence. Now, what I mean by that is it's literally just a list that you keep somewhere. So with me, it's on my notes on my Mac, right? Where anything that you've done that's excellent, you write it down. Any great bit of feedback that you've got, keep it in a live document format that any moment that you're like, I'm not worthy, I'm an imposter, you can literally just go and go, oh no, hold on, I'm super worthy. Oh, hold up, I'm amazing. Oh, hold up. And I'd like to talk also about how we weave that into our career narrative, but I'll pause there in case you have follow-on questions or comments, Kelly.
No, I mean, I'm just like, that is great. I love the inventory of excellence, or I've heard it being called like it's like a CV where you just shout out all the good things you've done. And I think that is so important. And it kind of touches on your point earlier around like imposter syndrome and kind of using those folders, files, however you've collated it, to help pick yourself up and be like, you deserve this job, you are worthy of this interview, and to just be your own hype person, really.
Yeah, exactly right. And as recruiters, we often know, we think, oh, recruitment, I can do that, right? I can do that. I know how that works. I am recruitment. So we kind of neglect our own experience in being recruited, right? Because we can kind of wing it. We can kind of have conversations with anyone. We can kind of wing it. But this is where, I mean, the case file is one thing, but really intentionally crafting your career narrative is another activity that I have people do, because it shifts the world's perception of you and what you offer them. But more importantly, as you start to speak in a more powerful language about yourself, you shift your own perspective of yourself, right? So it's the difference between, I worked for Shazam for almost 5 years as a recruiter and left when the company sold to Apple. And I led talent for Shazam for almost 5 years. It's amazing to look back and realize that my team was responsible for building a company from a human standpoint that was bought by Apple. Right? So there's a big difference. I've completely leveled up. I'm like, I led talent.
Yeah.
And I look back and you see that sort of, it's almost like, what do they call it? That sort of something smugness, but you know what I mean? It's like, you know, like the humble brag. That's it. Humble
Yeah.
brag. Humble brag. But, you know, you need to be humble bragging when you're talking about your career story, you know? And I think really kind of demonstrating your ability to lead and create impact is a really big part of that. So go through your CV and call out the big event, like not just what were my achievements in that role, but did I personally broker the deal to sell Shazam to Apple? Of course I didn't. No. But do I claim that as one of my career achievements? Absolutely I do. Because why wouldn't I? Because I was part of the organization as we did that. So, you know, it doesn't always have to be a me thing, but go through all of your roles and look at the big events that happened, the big milestones, your own achievements, and then go through it all again and like infuse it like an injection of like power verbs, you know, like owned, led, built, created, established, maximized, optimized, chaired, empowered. Like you can really kind of dial up on everything that you're saying about you. And I honestly also recommend that you actually keep telling yourself your new empowered career story in the mirror until you start believing it. Same with self-esteem in general. Like greet yourself in the mirror. Hey, beautiful. No one else is there. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Like, wow, that was I'm really proud of that thing that you did. That was amazing. You know, like I honestly am all for a conversation in the mirror.
I love that. And it's also kind of that thing in terms of, I know I kind of keep going back to it, but that imposter syndrome, you know, our words are very powerful and the words that we tell ourselves is so powerful. And like you said, if it's you in front of the mirror or in your car on the drive to work, you're just there by yourself. It's really, you know, a powerful time where actually you can help yourself build up your own confidence. And I think certainly at the moment in TA and HR, the way the market is, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are facing redundancies or they've been out of work for a while, and that affects your confidence. And actually, if there's ways like through various kind of tools, workshops, exercises, the way you speak to yourself, that you can just start to help yourself understand that, you know, you are worthy of these jobs, you are worthy of the positions that you've had, the interviews that you're going for as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And trust me, your skills in recruitment are amazing and are highly transferable if you want to transfer them, right? So getting clear about what that looks like for you. And if anybody has specific questions about, you know, the move from talent to HR, then maybe drop them in the chat, in the comments now, so that we can start to see those. If that's something you think you want, then very happy to share more on what my experience of that is and has been. But you know, my overwhelming message is, and by the way, if anybody, I actually want to hear what people's bold ambitions were if they feel like sharing them. If you don't, it's okay. It's okay if you don't. I mean, I know MC Hammer meets Tony Robbins is quite hard to beat.
I think it is very hard to beat.
Yeah, I know. If you've got questions that came out of that section, then do start to drop them in the chat, because then we can get to them.
Yeah, exactly. And like Ruth said, we always like to have time for a Q&A at the end. So the joy of watching these live versus the replay is you actually get to chat to Ruth and actually, you know, have some answers given directly to you. So do drop them in. I guess like on that note, before we kind of wrap up, is there anything that you kind of think in terms of, I guess, lasting words of wisdom, maybe for someone who is kind of going through this at the moment and kind of thinking, I do want to pivot, or maybe it's not even that they want to pivot. It's like, I need a pivot because the market is telling me, you know, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, what would your kind of resounding piece of advice be?
Yeah. It I think it would be to have a mindset of experimentation, right? So you don't have to pick one specific lane and, oh my gosh, your whole life depends on it, and right? what are the ways that you can gently test things? So lots of us work in tech, right? Look at how engineers build a product, right? They create what's the smallest way? Like we think that this might work. That's where they start the hypothesis. What's the tiniest thing that we can do in order to test whether we're right or not? Yeah, right. So look for what are the tiny tests that you can do, right? Maybe the tiny test is okay, I need to speak to in the next month 10 chief people officers to see whether I actually want that job, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the tiny test. And then you prove yourself right or wrong. Okay, yeah, I like that. Okay, so what's my next test? What's the next thing? But try to make them specific. Try to be like, I will be right if this happens. And if this happens, then take that as a confirmation and then do your next experiment. And very happy to talk to people more about experiment design if they want, because I very much believe in, and a big part of what we do in Bloom is bring innovation tools into how we're approaching leadership, our careers, and everything like that, because it's really important to become systematic and be okay with, I tried that and that didn't work for me. I tried that, didn't love it. Okay, now let's try the next thing, right? So having that kind of beginner's mindset, that experimental mindset, being okay with something not being perfect, and being okay with shifting. The founder journey for me is absolutely about being okay with not being perfect and pivoting.
Yes.
And okay, that didn't work. Right, then let's try and find something else that does work. Okay, great. But this is validating what I think. Great. Okay, so then let's move in that direction. And I'll come back to that book, Designing Your Life, because that really helps you think about how you can start to beta test some of the things that you think you might like to find out whether you actually like them.
I love that. And I guess like you've kind of, in terms of like what we've talked about, there's a few kind of ways people can start to tackle it. So it's like start by doing a bit of a values exercise, get to understand who you are, what are your values, your intrinsic values. You're not going to be a different person inside and outside of work. I think that's one of the things that we have to hone in on. Then we've got the 5 Ps in terms of, starting to fill out, what do we need? Where are we at the moment? Like you said, do you need more peace in your life? Do you need more pay? And also, I think, like we're saying, that executive team around you. And then I love that piece around maybe picking, X amount of people that you want to speak to figure out, like, is this route right? What's your view on, I guess, mentors? So for someone who we'll say is senior enough within their recruitment role and thinking about, pivoting, do you think it's worth having a mentor within HR, or do you think it's better to actually speak to several different people to get a view in terms of what that transition or pivot would be like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth finding out, finding out information from people. And a mentor is really about, I'm further ahead in something that you're doing potentially, and therefore, and so a lot of the time where I'm working with women in talent and HR and whatever, it's because it's kind of half coach, half mentor, right? But a coach can really coach anybody, and it doesn't matter. I don't need to know what you're doing to be able to coach you and ask you great questions, right? So sometimes I'm absolutely huge advocate of mentors, particularly the ones that can open doors. And but remember, champion, challenger, cheerleader, right? Mentors should be all around you, really. That's how I see that executive team very much. But what you really need is the person that's going to be asking you the right questions. So if you're in this soul searching journey, like, actually there might be, you might actually be better off having less input from people who are actually in a job that will tell you and talk you into it, and get quieter within yourself and go, now what's the truth of what I think here, right? So it might be that it's actually time for you to find someone to ask you the right questions versus tell you things, and in which case then a coach might be a better solution. But I always have a full quota of both coaches,
Yeah.
mentors, everything. Because yes, absolutely, I want to learn from the people that are further ahead doing the thing that I want to do, but I also want to be authentically asking myself questions. Who am I today? And by the way, I do my values every single year, and they evolve slightly because every year I'm slightly different than I was before. So let's, you know, become agile in the way that you're approaching your career and really honor the person that you are today versus an outdated version of yourself that no longer exists.
I love that. Constantly having to revisit, right? Like you said, we're ever evolving people. One year can be very different to the other.
That's
And
it.
like, I always say after these webinars as well, we can always continue the conversation over in Hire. Ruth, you're obviously a member of Hire as well, and I think it's always
Yay!
a lovely way where we can dive a little bit deeper into these conversations if there's any points that we haven't covered, or if you're watching the replay as well, because I know with time zones we get quite a lot of people tuning in after as
Yeah.
well. So I've just popped the link below. So if you aren't already a member of Hire, you can head on over and we can obviously carry on these fabulous conversations in there. But Ruth, I guess from your side, like where else can people find you and kind of, I guess, learn more around Bloom and what you're doing at the moment as well?
Yeah, so definitely LinkedIn is a great platform for me. And do invite me to connect. Don't just follow me. I hate that LinkedIn has become this following place. Can we just connect and be peers, please? We are peers, right? I am your peer. Connect with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram if you want to see me noodling around and being silly sometimes at Ruth Penfold. But my website is ourtimetobloom.com. My goal is to launch the new version of the course and community in September time. Let me see if I can get there. But if you want to join the waitlist for that, Kelly's got a little link that you can click on to make sure that you join that. Yeah, that's me. Come and find me. Come and hang with me. Tell me what resonated. Tell me what didn't. Give me some feedback. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with you all outside of this space.
Amazing. And, we will be back. Well, by we, it'll be me. Unfortunately, Ruth won't be with me next week. But we have another webinar next Wednesday. So we've got Chris Marty, who's an operating partner at a VC. And actually, this conversation is all around working in TA within a VC. And this is another conversation that has sprung up quite a lot within the Hire community in terms of what does talent acquisition look like when you're working for a venture capitalist company, and what can that actually mean for your career. And I think a huge part of the conversations are, where can I go now in TA? What is the path for me? What can that look like? And similar to the conversation today with Ruth, this is quite an exploratory one in terms of the land of TA, the ever evolving world of TA that we find ourselves in as well. But for myself and Ruth, I feel like we're news anchors signing off for the day. But it's been great to have you all join. Ruth, it's been amazing as always to
Thank
chat
you
to
for
you and have
being
you
here,
here.
everyone.
And hopefully see you all soon. And like I said, please head over to Hire if you're working in internal TA or HR, want to pick up the conversation a little bit more. And myself and Ruth will be happy to chat through anything that we brought up today and discussed, and hopefully see you all soon. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, Kelly.